Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Pav and I'm Director and Head Coach here at Direct Power Coaching. This is the fourth part of my webinar series on coaching you on how to be your own coach. So far we've tackled training, nutrition and mentality. If you've not seen those, there's two places you can see them. First of all, they're on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/PavBrian. And second, they are on my blog, which is directpowercoaching.com/blog. They're all equally important chapters, and regardless of what event you do, you should spend some time on each of these sections. Each one will bring you a significant, or will be a significant step in reaching your overall goal. Tactics is the one we're going to tackle today. This is going to be the shorter of the four parts. Potentially, it has the potential to be the longest of the parts. Now, I'm not going to sit here and go through a step-by-step guide on how to road race. There's so many things that evolve out of that in reality, that's something that you would discuss amongst a team rather than being led by myself. Of course, you want the input of an experienced rider and racer at that point, but today's not going to be that point. Today, we're going to focus on some of the smaller things that are generally applicable to every type of cycling, every discipline of cycling, and not just road racing. So those look at primarily, they'll be on the day of your event. How can you make the most of that? The tactics, and that can be warm up, cool down. Cool down's a funny one because it's not really going to affect on your day. Every session or ride that you've done before that, your cool down is going to help, because the better you cool down, the quicker you recover and the more effective your next session will be. So on that as well, we've got fueling and pacing. Again, all crucial to making sure that you do all the training and you can eat right and you can have the right mentality. But if you go off too hard, you're just going to kill yourself and you're not going to have a great day. So you can ruin it in just this. Okay, so then we've got leading into the event, which looks like tapering, activation sessions. Some people call that warming up the day before. I call it an activation session or a day before session. It's just something a bit like your warm up does on the day, but to the day before, it's just going to switch your body and mind on. We'll also talk about position. So depending on your event, whether you need or would suit an aero position, one fit for climbing or more comfortable. Okay, so let's talk about on the day. So with my clients, one of the first things I ask them is what their warm-up routine is and does it work every time? Most people, 90% of people, do not say it works every time, which is totally understandable. What's going to give you an extra few percent perhaps is having a warm-up that works. If you want a good example of one, I just simply point people at the British cycling one. It's a 20-minute warm-up. Cadence based, has like some sprints in it, a bit like a sort of spin up type session as well. So that's a great place to start. And what I always say to clients is that what we're going to do is develop this in key sessions and testing so that when they get to their event, they have their warm up perfect. They know exactly what to do. Like I say, is that what you're looking for here is something that's not just going to switch your body on so your body knows exactly what to do, but also your mind. It's incredibly important to make sure your mind is in the right place to be able to take on your event. So the principle applies whether your key event is a hill climb time trial, 10 miles, ultra endurance, Ride London, road racing, or whatever. We want you to have something that's a routine that's going to just switch you on. Of course, if you're doing something like Ride London or an ultra endurance, you might not do a full 20 minutes. You could simply just be aware that for the first 10 minutes or so, you're going to pedal in an easy manner and not go bat out a hill from the word off. And the last thing anybody wants is to train for 9 months or whatever, and then get through to their key event and have an injury in the first few miles. Obviously, there's the physical side to warming up, but there's the mental side of just getting your head in the right place. Cooling down. So again, perfect example here where it'd be really important is multiple day events, maybe doing something like the Hot Route, or you've got stage race. You want your body to be as effective in the next session as possible. everything counts and your recovery starts with your cool down. Again, it's one of the questions that I ask my clients at the beginning. Do they have a cool down? Does it work every time? Now, again, 90% of people, they probably have something, might not work every time. Now, cooling down is obviously quite hard for you to say for definite that it works every time, because there's going to be so many other factors that will make the gauge of this different. So, for example, the way you know if your cool down's working or not might be whether you can hit the next session hard enough. But between your cool down and that next session, you could have any number of things like different diet, better sleep, less stress, all of these things. So cooling down is something where I tend to just say you can do something as complex as reversing a warm up. That's not an issue. You could do something like 10 minutes of pedaling, low power, high RPM, easy pedaling if you're not using the power meter. What you've just got to be looking for is to return your body to pre-exercise state. So you want your heart rate to return to what it was before. You want to obviously stop sweating. You want to be calm, collected. You want to be the person that you were before starting. Now, it's not always going to happen, but we want you to get there as closely as possible. Cooling down might include some stretching. I very much love people to do some stretching. I think that it really helps. There's a great video on my YouTube channel. And if you want my ultimate guide to recovery, you can sign up for my newsletter. It comes in the first one. Again, that's on my website. And that's just going to really, I always find it really helps your legs feel a lot fresher. And then, of course, really cooling down, you're going to eat, you're going to rehydrate, and all these things as well. Okay, so fueling, having a plan that you've tested in training and then sticking to it. If you're racing or anything like that, you're probably going to stick to the plan that you've tested in training. You'd be silly to deviate. You would have tested out certain gels, bars, what works during 10s, 25s, which might be nothing. It's very common to be nothing. Certainly, if you're doing a hill climb or a 10, I would expect you to not eat or drink during. Even if it's hot, you probably get away with being able to pre-hydrate and then rehydrate a 10, because you're only going to be doing it for 20 odd minutes, maybe under, maybe a bit more. 25 on a hot day, would you take a drink? Yeah, perhaps. If you're lucky enough to have one of the bikes with the new integrated drinks mounts and the front, I think Scott Plasma and Giant Trinity are two examples, then you're winning anyway, aren't you? Because that's there. You might as well have a little bit of water in there. It's going to help you out. I mean, dehydration will kill your performance quicker than anything else. But necessarily on a cool day, would you need to drink on a 25? Probably not. Your personal preference, maybe. Do you need to eat? Again, maybe there's a psychological benefit to having a gel. If you're a fan of caffeine, maybe that as well in the last stint. But you could probably eat something in your warm-up, and your body should, if you're eating well enough around your training and racing, you should be able to knock out a 25 without risking like running out of any energy. So anything longer than that, of course, 50s or road races, stage races, anything, you're probably going to have a plan that you've worked to. You can check out my Nutritionally Fit program. That's great. That has a load of different natural ways to fuel your body. So there's it's not against gels by any means. There's a convenient way to take gels. Obviously, try and get one with natural sugars rather than anything refined. But that's what Nutritionally Fit is. It's got a load of natural stuff that you can cook at home. You can eat it around day to day as well. Take it as a snack to work or whatever. Family can eat it too. What we're talking about here mainly though, if you're fueling, is that if you're doing a sportive, particularly, I always say the Belgian ones are really good for that, because they have a lot of stuff that we don't necessarily put out or get in the UK, like sugar waffles and stuff like that. And it all looks great. And if you've done any of the classics, you'll know what I'm talking about here. And it's all laid out. You sort of grab it, and I know too many people who have done that. They've grabbed something, eaten it, and then their stomachs reacted badly and have needed to stop and relieve themselves, or they've had to stop because they've had severe stomach cramps or something like that. Now, it's unrealistic for me to be sort of preaching to you and saying that if you're riding 6, 7, 8 hours, you're going to carry everything with you. What you can do is you can either find what people have from previous years, what their experience it was with the feed stations, and see what they've got going there, or you can get hold of the organisers and find out what they have. And just bear in mind that with feed stations, it all looks really lovely, but you've got thousands of people sweating and it's a hot day, bugs, and it's all this food's laid out. It's a hotbed for all kinds of bacteria and stuff like that. Don't want to put you off, and you should eat, obviously, but just be mindful. And yeah, fueling something that you work on a lot in training. You should have your fueling strategy. You know exactly what you need to eat, when you need to eat it. You can tailor that around if you've got an event. I always do a similar thing with the marathoner. I know where the climbs are and when it would be optimal for me to eat something. If you've got feed stations in certain places, and you're going to have a hot event, then you know you're going to have to stop. Can you skip a feed station? If you want to go for a really good time, can you skip one, go to the next one? Or is that going to be an issue? Are you going to dehydrate? Plan that all out. Pacing. Okay, yeah. So this is a massive one. It's not going to be as simple as just holding one consistent power the whole way through, particularly when you're doing a sportive, really hilly. But you should be able to understand roughly what your limits are. For example, you know what your FTP is. So if you're climbing and that the climb is typically an hour long, you know, your power's not going to be longer than that, or not going to be above that, because if you do it, that's setting a new FTP for a start. Well done, but you're probably going to be a bit tired for the rest of the event. If you're using heart rate, you can use the same principles. It's not an issue really there. You use pacing in a long event more as something to hold you back and just to be like, yeah, I know I can't sustain this for longer than this amount of time. So am I being silly by trying to tackle this climb, which is X in duration, with Y amount of power? So there's a lot of stuff you can do at pacing. Okay, so leading into your A event, tapering. A taper is a gradual reduction in training volume. Now, you retain some intensity. It's going to increase your ability to recover and peak without losing that edge or that memory of what the intensity of the event you're going to do. So that's how I work it. Not always, most of the time I match the taper intensity to the intensity of the event that's the target. I know people who don't do any tapering, and I know people who use the whole 3 weeks. 3 weeks is usually the max because your body will take up to 3 weeks to see that adaptation from training. So if you've got one event and that's it, a 3 week taper makes a lot of sense, because anything you do after that taper, your body might not have introduced that or been able to adapt to that by the time of your event. So spending 3 weeks focusing on recovery, peaking your fitness and getting your body in the right shape and conditioning rather than looking to improve is wise. However, most of us aren't doing one event and one event only. So you might want to shorten that, and you could do 2 weeks. If you've got some more events coming up after it, we'd still suggest 2 weeks minimum if that event is really important to you. Now, if you've got a series of events, then 1 week might be okay, because your 1 week is going to mean that you're going to be fairly fit still, but actually you're going to carry through some of that adaptation and fitness into more events coming up. It's something that you could play around with. Definitely use minor events and maybe testing to play around with a mini taper to see how you feel. You can gauge a lot from what actually is going to or isn't going to work from just using like an easy week as a sort of little taper and running through to a test and seeing how that is. Like, do you work best when you drop all of it off really quickly and then have a super easy week leading into your test? Or do you need some sort of exponential taper with a fast or slow decay, which is basically how quick you drop off that load? Or is it linear? And that means equal reduction day by day into that event. So that's the 4 main types. You can play around with that and just figure out. And I think the last time I heard or read a study was about you can get a 6% increase in performance from a correct taper. So getting that sorted you can see would be very worthwhile. So activation session, like I said, it's like a day before session. So anybody that wants an idea of what that looks like, I always point my clients to starting with doing their warm up that they're developing for an event, then tying in maybe some more super easy geared high RPM sprints, and then a few short intervals at the intensity of the event for the next day. So we're just going to use an FTP test if you're doing a little activation session for that. And we would be using an activation session for that maybe as a development so that you have that activation right for your A event. You might do like 2 by 2 minutes on off FTP. So 2 on FTP and then 2 minutes easy twice. this, and that's going to give you some intensity of the event you're going to do the next day. Your body's going to be remember tomorrow what that intensity is going to feel like. It's not going to be a shock. Your body's not going to be like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this. Similarly, your mind's going to feel exactly the same thing. It's going to be really fresh. And having that activation session is very much like that warm up. Once you've done it, you should be able to just get in that zone and be like, yep, I know I'm going to do well. And once you introduce that positivity into your mindset, you're really going to start seeing some good results. So you finish that activation session with like a cool down 10, 20 minutes stretching. And like I say, the idea of that is that you develop that before testing, see events, so that when you get to your A event, you know exactly what you're going to do. I know far too many people who do either too much or nothing the day before their event. Now, some people that works for them, that's fine if they know it does. But most people, if they did one structured session, half hour, depending on how long your event is, the next day will find that's much more beneficial. Position. So we're going to just go through my thoughts on what your position should be. So you'll know there's three main types of road bike, and you could set the bikes up differently. But if you're looking to buy a new bike, you might want to match what your new bike's going to be to what your events are. So for example, you want an aero frame. If you're racing solo or time trials, flatter routes, aero is going to be your best. Not necessarily the most comfortable, and climbing ability might suffer slightly, but really good for all out speed. Now you can go, if you're doing time trials and you're looking for a new bike, you might want to just go out and get a time trial bike. That's going to be the fastest way to do that. But other than that, yeah, an aero frame is really good for those things. Okay, so climbing bikes, you would want one of these if you're spending the majority of your time climbing. Just have a slightly more upright position, sort of allows for a bit more power and a little bit more oxygen coming in. So you're going to sacrifice aerodynamics here, but you're going to be going uphill and you're going to be doing that slowly, no doubt. So aerodynamics isn't going to be where you're going to see the biggest gains. But you're going to see the biggest gains is from being able to apply that power comfortably going uphill for large amounts of time. So that's why you'd want like a climbing bike frame. And then one of the most important ones, we've seen a lot more of these recently, and I quite like them, is comfort frames, or frames that are designed for comfort. So they're going to have some aerodynamic capabilities. Well, I mean, they'll all have a bit of crossover of each, just worth mentioning that, but some will be set up with one focus in mind. And a comfort bike's going to sacrifice a lot of all-out speed and climbing in pursuit of comfort. So this is really good for people doing like Audaxes, ultra events, anything like that. Maybe day in, day out events as well. So you're doing like multiple day events. Comfort's going to be the way. So the way to pick your bike is two ways really. The bottom point says it all. Bike fit, get one, and get fitted to your bike is probably the best thing. So if you're looking for a new frame, go and have a bike fit. Seems maybe like counterproductive, but good bike fitters stick you on a jig and measure you up, find what's the best position for you, and then be like, yep, here's the frames that are going to suit you the best. And that's probably the best way to do it. And last thing you want to do is spend thousands of pounds on a bike and then go for a bike fit and then be like, well, we're going to struggle to get you in an ideal fit for you. It's not what you want to hear. But so then once you know that, then you're going to know that, and then pick the one that's most suitable for you. If you're doing races, you're going to want one of the top two, depending on what who you're like, what your body composition like, what your strengths are. Aero, probably the better ones there, unless you're doing super light at hilly events or anything. So you might want to go for a lighter weight frame. Similarly, if you're just doing like Ride London and stuff like that, then maybe you just want to go for the comfort bike. I mean, if you've got the money, go for all three. Anyway, so thank you for tuning in to the end of part 4 and obviously the end of my webinar. I hope you've enjoyed listening as much as I have talking about it. There's much more to be found on my blog where I'm creating more videos, and I've got a great little 1-minute challenge series where I try to explain one of my blogs in 1 minute. So thanks so much. And if you have any questions, you can email me direct at pav@directpowercoaching.com.